Hello, hello. We're moving right along to the fourth speaker, Demosthenes. Still in Greek, in the Greek sort of section, another Athenian, and he is delivering this speech on the crown. And they say of him that Demosthenes is generally acclaimed as one of the greatest orators of all time. His oration on the crown, in the opinion of Professor R. C. Jebb, is the most finished, the most splendid, and the most pathetic work of ancient eloquence. And I did have to look this up because I thought, pathetic, why? Why is it pathetic? And this is an old meaning of the word pathetic, which means that it appeals to pathos or emotion. Here we are. Oh, I have some context on the speech because I started reading it, but I was interrupted because my girlfriend's having car trouble, which is okay. He is denouncing this man who is called Aeschines, and this man Aeschines, when he starts out the speech and says, "accursed scribbler," he refers to Aeschines. Aeschines was a peer of Socratos, apparently, or a student, and they appear to be in contention for some position of public office. Aeschines appears to have said two things about Demosthenes. First, that he is rich and not so rich as to be unfit to essentially give a shit about the average person, the common man. And second, that this man associates with Philip of Macedon with too friendly of a countenance. And Demosthenes is very upset and frankly not having it. The last piece of background is that this man Aeschines models himself as a man of the people who arose from poverty. All right. On the crown. Accursed scribbler, you, to deprive me of the approbation and affection of my countrymen, speak of trophies and battles and ancient deeds, with none of which this present trial has the least concern. But I, O you third-rate actor, I, that arose to counsel the state how to maintain her preeminence. In what spirit was I to mount the hustings? In the spirit of one having unworthy counsel to offer? I should have deserved to perish. You yourselves, men of Athens, may not try private and public causes on the same principles. The compacts of everyday life you are to judge by particular laws and circumstances, the measures of statesmen by reference to the dignity of your ancestors. And if you think it your duty to act worthily of them, you should every one of you consider, when you come into court to decide public questions, that together with your staff and ticket the spirit of the Commonwealth is delivered to you. Athenians, you have had many great and renowned orators before me. The famous Callistratus, Aristophane, Cephalus, Theraspolus, hundreds of others, yet none of them ever thoroughly devoted himself to any measure of state. For instance, the mover of a resolution would not be ambassador. The ambassador would not move a resolution. Each one left for himself some relief, and also, should anything happen, an excuse. How then, it may be said, did you so far surpass others in might and boldness as to do everything yourself? I don't say that. But such was my conviction to the danger impeding over us, that I considered it left no room or thought for individual security. A man should have been only too happy to perform his duty without neglect. As to myself I was persuaded, perhaps foolishly, yet I was persuaded, that none would move better resolutions than myself, none would execute them better, none as ambassador would show more zeal and honesty. Therefore I undertook every duty myself. Through my policy, which he arraigns, Instead of the Thebans invading this country with Philip, as all expected, they joined our ranks and prevented him. Instead of the war being in Attica, it took place 700 furlongs from the city on the confines of Boeotia. Instead of corsairs issuing from Euba to plunder us, Attica was in peace on the coast side during the whole war. Instead of Philip being master of the Hellespont by taking Byzantium, the Byzantines were our auxiliaries against him. Does this computation of services, think you, resemble the casting of accounts against? Or should we strike these out on a balance and not look that they be kept in everlasting remembrance? I will not set down. One moment. I will not set down that of cruelty remarkable in cases where Philip got people all at once into his power. Others have had the trial, while of the generosity which, casting about for his future purposes, he assumed toward Athens, you have happily enjoyed the fruits. I pass that by. If you talk about just conditions with the Thebans, Aeschines, or with the Byzantines or Euboeans, or discuss now the question of equal terms, first I say, you are ignorant that of the galleys formerly which defended Greece, being 300 in number, our commonwealth furnished 200, and never, as it seemed, thought herself injured by having done so, never prosecuted those who advised it, or expressed any dissatisfaction. Shame on her if she had, but was grateful to the gods that, when a common danger beset the Greeks, she alone furnished double what the rest did for the preservation of all. Besides, it is but a poor favor you do to your countrymen by calumniating me. For what is the use of telling us now what we should have done? Why, being in the city and present, did you not make your proposals then, if indeed they were practicable at a crisis, when we had to accept not what we liked, but what the circumstances allowed? Remember, there was one ready to bid against us, to welcome eagerly those that we rejected, and give money into the bargain. But if I am accused for what I have actually done, how would it have been if, through my hard bargaining, the states had gone off and attached themselves to Philip, and he had become master at the same time of Euboea, Thebes, and Byzantium? What think you these impious men would have said or done? Said doubtless that the states were abandoned, that they wished to join us and were driven away, that he had got command of the Hellespont and the Byzantines and become master of the wheat trade of Greece, that a heavy neighbor war had by means of the Thebans been brought into Attica, that the sea had become unnavigable by the excursion of pirates from Euba. All this they would have said, sure enough, and a great deal besides. A wicked, wicked thing, O Athenians, is a calumniator always, every way spiteful and fault-finding. This creature is a reptile by nature, that from the beginning never did anything honest or liberal, a very ape of tradition, village omnaus, counterfeit orator. What advantage has your eloquence been to your country? Now do you speak to us about the past, as if a physician should visit his patients, not order or prescribe anything to cure the disease, but on the death of any one, when the last ceremonies were performing, should follow him to the grave and expound how, if the poor fellow had done this or that, he never would have died. Idiot, do you speak now? Even the defeat, if you exult in that which should make you groan, you accursed one, by nothing that I have done will it appear to have befallen us. Consider it thus, O Athenians. From no embassy upon which I was commissioned by you did I ever come away defeated by the ambassadors of Philip, neither from Thessaly, nor from Ambracia, nor from the kings of Thrace, nor from Byzantium, nor from any other place, nor on the last recent occasion from Thebes. But where his ambassadors were vanquished in argument, he came in arms and carried the day. And for this you call me to account? And are not ashamed to jeer the same person of cowardice whom you require single-handed to overcome the might of Philip? And that too by words. For what else had I at my command? Certainly not the spirit of each individual, nor the fortune of the army, nor the conduct of the war, for which you would make me accountable. Such a blunderer are you. You understand me, yet understand me. Of what a statesman may be responsible for, I allow the utmost scrutiny. I deprecate it not. What are his functions? To observe things in the beginning, to foresee and foretell them to others. This I have done again, wherever he finds delays, backwardness, ignorance, jealousies, vices inherent and unavoidable in all communities, to contract them into the narrowest compass, and on the other hand, to promote unanimity and friendship and zeal in the discharge of duty. All this too I have performed, and no one can discover the least neglect on my part. Ask any man by what means Philip achieved most of his successes, and you will be told, by his army, and by his bribing and corrupting men in power. Well, your forces were not under my command or control, so that I cannot be questioned for anything done in that department. But by refusing the price of corruption, I have overcome Philip. For as the offer of a bribe, if accepted, has vanquished the taker, so the person who refuses it and is not corrupted has vanquished the person offering. Therefore, is the Commonwealth undefeated, as far as I am concerned. For my part, I regard anyone who reproaches his fellow man with fortune as devoid of sense. He that is best satisfied with his condition, he that deems his fortune excellent, cannot be sure that it will remain so until the evening. How then can it be right to bring forward or upbraid any other man with it? As Aeschines, however, has on this subject, besides many others, expressed himself with insolence, look, men of Athens, and observe how much more truth and humanity there shall be in my discourse upon fortune than in his. I hold the fortune of our commonwealth to be good, and I so find the oracles of Dodonian Jupiter and Pythian Apollo declaring to us. The fortune of all mankind, which now prevails, I consider cruel and dreadful. For what Greek, what barbarian, has not in these times experienced a multitude of evils? That Athens chose the noblest policy, that she fares better than those very Greeks who thought if they abandon us, they should abide in prosperity, I reckon as part of her good fortune. If she suffered reverses, if all happened not to us as we desired, I conceive she has had that share of the general fortune which fell to our lot. As to my fortune, personally speaking, or of that of any individual among us, it should as I conceive, be judged in connection with personal matters. Such is my opinion on the subject of fortune, a right and just one, as it appears to me, and I think you will agree with it. Aeschines says that my individual fortune is paramount to that of the commonwealth, the small and mean to the good and great. How can this possibly be? However, if you are determined, Aeschines, to scrutinize my fortune, compare it with your own. And if you find my fortune better than yours, cease to revile it. Look then from the very beginning, and I pray and entreat that I may not be condemned for bad taste. I don't think any person wise who insults poverty, or who prides himself on having been bred in affluence. But by the slander and malice of this cruel man I am forced into such a discussion, and I will conduct with all the moderation which circumstances allow. I had the advantage, Aeschines, in my boyhood of going to proper schools, and having such allowances as a boy should have, who is to do nothing mean from indigence. Arrived at man's estate, I lived suitably to my breeding, was choir master, ship commander, rate payer, backward in no acts of liberality, public or private, but making myself useful to the commonwealth and to my friends. When I entered upon state affairs, I chose such a line of policies that both my country and many people of Greece have crowned me many times, and not even you, my enemies, venture to say that the line I chose was not honorable. Such then has been the fortune of my life. I could enlarge upon it, but I forbear, lest what I pride myself in should give offense. But you, the man of dignity who spit upon others, look what sort of fortune is yours compared with mine. As a boy, you were reared in abject poverty, waiting with your father in his school, grinding the ink, sponging the benches, sweeping the room, doing the duty of a menial rather than a free-born man. After you were grown up, you attended your mother in the initiations, reading her books, and helping in all the ceremonies. At night, wrapping the novitiates in fawn skin, swilling, purifying, and scouring them with clay and bran, raising them after the lustration, and bidding them say, "Bad I have scraped, and better I have found." Priding yourself that no one ever howled so lustily, and I believe him. For don't suppose that he who speaks so loud is not a splendid howler. In the daytime, you led your noble orgiasts, sorry if you heard that scream outside, crowned with fennel and poplar, through the highways, squeezing the big-cheeked serpents and lifting them over your head, and shouting Evo Sabo as leader, conductor, chest-bearer, fan-bearer, and the like, getting as your reward tarts and biscuits and rolls, for which any man might well bless himself and his fortune. When you were enrolling among your fellow townsmen, by what means I stop not to inquire, enrolled among your fellow townsmen, by what means I stop not to inquire. When you were enrolled, however, you immediately selected the most honorable of employments, that of clerk and assistant to our petty magistrates. From this you were removed after a while, having done yourself all that you charge others with. And then, sure enough, you disgraced not your antecedents by your subsequent life, but hiring yourself to those ranting players, as they were called, Simulus and Socrates, you acted third parts, collected figs and grapes and olives like a fruiterer from other men's farms, and getting more from them than from the playing, in which the lives of your whole company were at stake. For there was an implacable and incessant war between them and the audience, for whom you received so many wounds, that no wonder you taunt as cowards people inexperienced in such encounters. By passing over what may be imputed to poverty, I will come to the direct charges against your character. You espoused a line of politics that, if your country prospered, you lived the life of a hare, fearing and trembling and ever expecting to be scourged for the crimes which your conscience accused you, though all have seen how bold you were during the misfortunes of the rest. A man who took courage at the death of 1,000 citizens, what does he deserve at the hands of the living? A great deal more that I could say about him I shall omit, for it is not all I can tell of his turpitude and infamy, which I ought to let slip from my tongue, but only what is not disgraceful to myself to mention. Contrast now the circumstances of your life and mine, gently with temper, Aeschines, and then ask these people whose fortune they would each of them prefer. You taught reading, I went to school. You performed initiations, I received them. You danced in the chorus, I furnished it. You were an assembly clerk, I was a speaker. You acted third parts, I heard you. You broke down, and I hissed. You have worked as a statesman for the enemy, and I for my country. I pass by the rest. But this very day I am on my probation for a crown, and am acknowledged to be innocent of all offense, while you are already judged to be a pettifogger. And the question is whether you shall continue that trade, or at once be silenced by not getting a fifth part of the votes. A happy fortune do you see you have enjoyed, that you should denounce mine as miserable. I will have done then with private topics, but say another word or two upon the public. If you can mention, Aeschines, a single man under the sun, whether Greek or barbarian, who has not suffered by Philip's power formerly, and Alexander's now, well and good, I concede to you that my fortune or misfortune, if you please, has been the cause of everything. But if many that never saw me or heard my voice have been grievously afflicted, not individuals only, but whole cities and nations, how much juster and fairer is it to consider that to the common fortune, apparently of all men, to a tide of events overwhelming and lamentable, these disasters are to be attributed. You, disregarding all this, accuse me, whose ministry has been among my countrymen, knowing all the while that a part, if not the whole, of your calumny falls upon the people, and yourself in particular. For if I assume the sole and absolute direction of our counsels, it was open to you, the other speakers, to accuse me. But if you were constantly present in all the assemblies, if the state invited public discussion of what was expedient, and if these measures were then believed by all to be the best, and especially by you, for certainly from no good will did you leave me in the possession of hopes and admiration and honors, all of which attended on my policy, but doubtless because you were compelled by truth and had nothing better to advise, is it not iniquitous and monstrous to complain now of measures than which you could suggest none better at the time? I should conclude, Aeschines, that you undertook this cause to exhibit your eloquence and the strength of your lungs, not to obtain satisfaction for any wrong. But it is not the language of the orator, Aeschines, that has any value, nor yet the tone of his voice, but his adopting the same views with the people, and his hating and loving the same persons that his country does. He that is thus minded will say everything with loyal intention. He that courts persons from the commonwealth apprehends danger to herself, rides not on the same anchorage with the people, and therefore has not the same expectation of safety. But, do you see, I have, for my objects are the same with those of my countrymen. I have no interests separate or distinct. Is that so with you? How can it be, when immediately after the battle you went as ambassador to Philip, who was at that period the author of your country's calamities, notwithstanding that you had been persisted in refusing that office, as all men know? And who is it that deceives the state? Surely the man who speaks not what he thinks. On whom does the crier pronounce a curse? Surely on such a man. What greater crime can an orator be charged with than that his opinions and his language are not the same? Such is found to be your character, and yet you open your mouth and dare look these men in the faces. Do you think they don't know you, or are you sunk in such slumber and oblivion as not to remember the speeches which you delivered in the assembly, cursing and swearing that you had nothing to do with Philip, and that I brought the charge against you out of a personal enmity without foundation? No sooner came the news of the battle than you forgot all that. You acknowledged and avowed that between Philip and yourself there subsisted a relationship of hospitality and friendship. New names these for your contract of hire. For upon what plea of equality or justice could Aeschines, son of Glaucothea, the timbrel player, be the friend or acquaintance of Philip? I cannot see. No, you were hired to ruin the interests of your countrymen, and yet, though you have been caught yourself in open treason and informed against yourself after the fact, you revile and reproach me for things which you will find any man is chargeable with sooner than I. Many great and glorious enterprises has the Commonwealth Aeschines undertaken and succeeded in through me, and she did not forget them. Here is the proof. On the election of a person to speak the funeral oration immediately after the event, you were proposed. But the people would not have you, notwithstanding your fine voice, nor Demosthenes, though he had just made the peace, nor Hegemon, nor any other of your party, but me. And when you and Pythocles came forward in a brutal and shameful manner, and urged the same accusations against me which you do now, and abused me, they elected me all the more. The reason, you are not ignorant of it, yet I will tell you. The Athenians knew as well the loyalty and zeal with which I conducted their affairs, as the dishonesty of you and your party. For what you denied upon oath in our prosperity, you confessed in the misfortunes of the Republic. They considered, therefore, that men who got security for their politics by the public disasters had been their enemies long before, and were avowedly such. They thought it right also that the person who was to speak in honor of the fallen and celebrate their valor should not have sat under the same roof or at the same table with their antagonists, that he should not revel there and sing a paean over the calamities of Greece in company with their murderers, and then come here and receive distinction, that he should not with his voice act the mourner of their fate, but that he should lament over them with his heart. This they perceived in themselves and in me, but not in any of you. Therefore they elected me, and not you. Nor, while the people felt thus, did the fathers and brothers of the deceased, who were chosen by the people to perform their obsequies, feel differently. For having to order the funeral banquet according to custom at the house of the nearest relative to the deceased, they ordered it at mine, and with reason, because, though each to his own was nearer of kin than I was, none was so near to them all collectively. He that had the deepest interest in their safety and success had upon their mournful disaster the largest share of sorrow for them all. Of this base and infamous conspiracy and profligacy, or rather, O Athenians, if I am to speak in earnest, this betrayal of Grecian liberty, Athens is by all mankind acquitted, owing to my counsels, and I am acquitted to you. Then do you ask me, O Aeschines, for what merit I claim to be honored? I will tell you. Because, while all the statesmen in Greece, beginning with yourself, have been corrupted formerly by Philip and now by Alexander, me neither opportunity nor fair speeches, nor large promises, nor hope, nor fear, nor anything else could tempt or induce me to betray aught what I consider just and beneficial to my country. Whatever I have advised my fellow citizens, I have never advised like you men, leaning as in a balance to the side of profit. All my proceedings have been those of a soul upright, honest, and incorrupt, entrusted with affairs of greater magnitude than any of my contemporaries. I have administered them all honestly and faithfully. Therefore, I do claim to be honored. These and the like measures, Aeschines, are what become an honorable citizen. By their success, O earth and heaven, we should have been the greatest people incontestably, and deserve to be so. Under their failure, the result is glory, and no one blames Athens or her policy. All condemn fortune that ordered so ordered things. But never will he desert the interests of the commonwealth, nor hire himself to their adversaries and study the enemy's advantages instead of his country, nor on a man who has the courage to advise and propose measures worthy of the state, and whose resolution to preserve them will he cast an evil eye, and if anyone privately offends him, remember and treasure it up, no, nor keep himself in a criminal and treacherous retirement, as you so often do. There is indeed a retirement just and beneficial to the state, such as you, the bulk of my countrymen, innocently enjoy. That, however, is not the retirement of Aeschines. Far from it. Withdrawing himself from public life when he pleases, and that is often, he watches for the moment when you are tired of a constant speaker, or when some reverse of fortune has befallen you, or anything untold has happened, and many are the casualties of human life. At such a crisis, he springs up an orator, rising from his retreat like a wind in full voice, with words and phrases collected. He rolls them out audibly and breathlessly, to no advantage or good purpose whatsoever, but to the detriment of some or other in his fellow citizens, and to the general disgrace. Yet from this labor and diligence, Aeschines, if proceeded from an honest heart, solicitous for your country's welfare, the fruits should have been rich and noble and profitable to all. Alliances of states, supplies of money, conveniences of commerce, enactment of useful laws, opposition to our declared enemies. All such things were looked for in former times, and many opportunities did the past afford for a good man and true to show himself, during which time you are nowhere to be found, neither first, second, third, fourth, fifth, nor sixth, not in any rank at all, certainly on no service by which your country was exalted. For what alliance has come to the state by your procurement? What succours, what acquisition of good, will, or credit? What embassy or agency is there of yours, by which reputation of the country has been increased? What concern domestic, Hellenic, or foreign, of which you have had the management and has improved under it? What galleys? What ammunition? What arsenals? What repair of walls? What cavalry? What in the world are you good for? What assistance in money have you ever given, either to the rich or the poor, out of public spirit or liberality? None. But, good sir, if there is nothing of this, there is at all events zeal and loyalty. Where? When, you infamous fellow? Even at a time when all who ever spoke upon the platform gave something for the public safety. At last Atrisonicus gave the sum which he had amassed to retrieve his franchise. You neither came forward nor contributed a mite. Not from inability, no, for you have inherited above 5 talents from Philo, your wife's father, and you had a subscription of 2 talents from the chairman of the boards for what you did to cut up the Navy law. But that I may not go from one thing to another and lose sight of the question, I pass this by, that it was not poverty prevented your contributing. Already appears it was, in fact, your anxiety to do nothing against those to whom your political life is subservient. On what occasions, then, do you show your spirit? When do you shine out? When aught is to be spoken against your countrymen? Then it is you who are splendid in voice, perfect in memory, and an admirable actor, a tragic Theocrates. You mention the good men of olden times, and you are right to do so. Yet it is hardly fair, O Athenians, that he should get the advantage of that respect which you have for the dead to compare and contrast me with them. Me, who am living among you, for what mortal is ignorant that toward the living there exists always more or less of ill will, whereas the dead are no longer hated by an enemy? Such being human nature, I am to be tried and judged by the standard of my predecessors? Heaven forbid. It is not just or equitable, Aeschines. Let me be compared with you, or any persons you like of your party who are still alive, and I consider this, whether it is more honorable and better for the state, that because of the services of a former age, prodigious though they are beyond all power of expression, those of the present generation should be unrequited and spurned, or that all who give proof of their good intentions should have their share of honor and regard from the people. Yet indeed, if I must say so much, my politics and principles, if considered fairly, will be found to resemble those of the illustrious ancients, and to have had the same objects in view, while yours resemble those of your calumniators. For it is certain there were persons in those times who ran down the living and praised dead people dead and gone, with a malignant purpose, like yourself. You say, I am nothing like the ancients. Are you like them, Aeschines? Is your brother, or any of your speakers? I assert that none is. But pray, my good fellow, that I may give you no other name. Try the living with the living, and with his competitors, as you would in all cases, poets, dancers, athletes. Philemon did not, because he was inferior to Glaucus or Caristris and some other champion of a bygone age, depart uncrowned from Olympia. But because he beat all who entered the ring against him, he was crowned and proclaimed conqueror. So I ask you to compare me with the orators of the day, with yourself, and with anyone you like. I yield to none. When the Commonwealth was at liberty to choose for her advantage, and patriotism was a matter of emulation, I showed myself a better counselor than any, and every act of state was pursuant to my decrees and laws and negotiations. None of your party was to be seen, unless you had to do the Athenians a mischief. After that lamentable occurrence, when there was a call no longer for advisers, but for persons obedient to command, persons ready to be hired against their country and willing to flatter strangers, then all of you were in occupation, grand people, with splendid equipages. I was powerless, I confess, though more attached to my countrymen than you. 2 things, men of Athens, are characteristic of a well-disposed citizen. So may I speak of myself and give the least offense. In authority, his constant aim should be the dignity and preeminence of the Commonwealth. In all times, circumstances, his spirit should be loyal. This descends upon nature, power and might and other things. Such a spirit you will find I have ever sincerely cherished. Only see, when my person was demanded, when they brought amphictyonic suits against me, when they menaced, when they promised, when they set those miscreants like wild beasts upon me, never in any way have I abandoned my affection for you. From the very beginning I chose an honest and straightforward course in politics, to support the honor, the power, and the glory of my fatherland. These to exalt, in these to have been in my being. I do not walk about the marketplace gay and cheerful, because the stranger has prospered, holding out my right hand and congratulating those who I think will report it yonder. And on any news of our own successes, shudder and groan and stoop to the earth, like these impious men who rail at Athens, as if in so doing they do not rail at themselves who look abroad. And if the foreigner thrives by the distresses of Greece, are thankful for it, and say we should keep him thriving to all time. Never, O you gods, may those wishes be confirmed by you. If possible, inspire even in these men a better sense and feeling. But if they are indeed incurable, destroy them by themselves, exterminate them on land and sea, and for the rest of us, grant that we may speedily be released from our present fears, and enjoy a lasting deliverance. That was a mouthful. This was the most fun to read. It was very fun to read, especially when he went off. He went off in that tried and true method of just listing things. He asks Aeschines, what have you done for your country, right? What has improved? What ships have you built? What ammunition? What arsenals? What walls have you repaired? What cavalry? What in the world are you good for? Oh. And then he rails against Aeschines and he says, a good man will never desert the interests of his country, nor hire himself to enemies, nor study the enemy's advantages, nor advise that enemy on how to attack it. Normally cast an evil eye, normally this, normally that. The most fun of it was, where was it? Oh yes, here it is. And then he asks this question, he says, when advice was needed, where were you to be found? Neither first, nor second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. Not in any rank at all. It is very pathological. Not like a liar, but like one who appeals to pathos. He was very pathetic, as the professor said in the beginning. And as such, it was very fun to read. I love the way he opened. He just says, "Accursed scribbler." Incredible. And he really, like any good politician, he brought up that one thing which he knew, or any politician, but it was a he, for him it was a he, would really bring his foe down, and that was apparently that Aeschines, if Demosthenes is to be believed, consulted Philip. If this is true, it is truly, I mean, he really drove that nail in, you know. I mean, I wasn't there, I don't know if it's true, but it was, he made Aeschines look like a backwards little coward. The only thing I didn't like was when he compared himself with Aeschines, and he basically said, well, you were raised poor, and I was raised rich, and so I am better. You know, you taught reading, I went to school, you performed initiations, I received them, you danced in the chorus, I furnished it, you weren't a clerk, I was a speaker, you acted, I heard you, you broke down, I hissed. But that is a small attack on the whole. I mean, it was even these things which I disagreed with in principle, I must admit, were delivered with stirring emotion, 100%. He also does this thing which is a little bit annoying, where he says, he does it first here. When you were enrolled among your fellow townsmen, by what means I stopped not to inquire. When you were enrolled, however, he did stop to inquire, but what he was really doing there was making the hearers of the speech wonder how he was really enrolled, suggesting that he was enrolled by dishonest means. And he does this again. I pass by the rest, but by saying you pass by it, you mention it, but without mentioning any specifics. The imagination is left to run wild and assume the worst of things. Very persuasive thing to do, although not maybe the most honorable approach. All the same. Really brilliantly delivered. I mean, and again, it was so fun to read. Really fun. The best part was when I got to say, what in the world are you good for? Oh, man. And he brings up a few good points. He says, if you will compare me to anyone, do not compare me with dead heroes, compare me with other men alive. He also has something rather honorable to his name, which is a record of being elected time and again. This is a good thing. excited to read the next one. It is the second oration against Philip.